Hey folks, so just a quick note based on a tension that we identified after the fact in this episode between oral history and archival or written history. So Indigenous oral histories include accounts linking smallpox outbreaks to Hudson's Bay blankets. These experiences are part of the lived record of colonial harm. Surviving colonial archives do not document intentional smallpox transmission by the Hudson's Bay Company, but archival records reflect the worldview and priorities of those who created them. Oral and written histories exist within different systems of knowledge and power. As the Supreme Court of Canada has affirmed, Indigenous oral histories can carry legal and evidentiary weight in understanding the past. Both offer insight into the history and impacts of colonialization. That'll be close enough.
It'll be close enough. All right, good morning, everybody. Tree Planters Land. Margaret here. I'm with Mary Lou. This is part 3 of 4. Adam behind the camera, of course. We're in St. Paul's Center in the, sorry, you're going to say the name for me again.
The Ogima Miskwake Gallery, named after the last hereditary leader of the Indigenous community here. It means chief or primary spokesperson, Red Earth. So this is the Red Earth Gallery, and it was a name agreed upon by the organization here with the Rama First Nation Chief and Tribal Council.
Mm-hmm. So we are in a part of St. Paul's Center in Aurelia, and this is a pretty unique space because what we've been doing over these past couple of sessions is going through Indigenous and non-Indigenous artwork from local artists, talking about truth and reconciliation and what it means to the artists and what it means to our community. Mary Lou is the curator today. And for those of you that haven't been joining along, we talked about session 1, which kicked it all off. Mm-hmm. And that was, you know, where the artists began with what does truth and reconciliation mean. Then they came back and did that round again. And how many years later?
It was 2 or 3 years later.
2 or 3 years later. Mm-hmm. And again, there was a call and response. So the first artist does a piece, it gets responded to or gets inspired by the next, and it continues. I'm simplifying it a lot only for, we just have only so much time today because we have this really amazing round 3 that we want to get to. So today we're looking at round 3, which was what year?
It began in 2021.
Okay, we're getting close to present day. Mm-hmm. And as I said, that we'll look at the first, and so for those of you that are following along visually, this will be a little bit easier. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, we're going to try to do a better job of describing what we're seeing and also talk a little bit more thematically and a little bit more abstract, so for those that don't have the visuals can still get something out of it. So patience with us. This is all new to everybody here. So, Mary Lou, what would you like to start about the round 3? Is it about the context of round 3, or do you want to start with the first piece of art?
I think I want to start with a little bit of historical context because this was a really interesting period of time in the history of the truth and reconciliation process in Canada. So much happened between the last round in 2018 and in this round that started in 2021. We've been working on this project now together as artists for 7 years. And even though we didn't meet a whole lot in between the different rounds, it allowed all of the artists to process all of the stuff that they had learned and experienced together through the artwork and the images that were granted them after going through Sweat Lodge to begin the round and then interacting with each other. We had asked for images that would touch the hearts of all who interacted and saw the images and inspire them to acts of personal and social acts of reconciliation and truth finding. And the artists literally did that through this entire process. And here's some of the stuff that happened just before this round was decided to be done. Between January 2018 and 2022, when this round began, on March 17th in 2020, who will ever forget that the WHO officially declared COVID-19 was an an outbreak. November to December in 2020, Ontario had rolling lockdowns. January 2021, a state of emergency was declared in Orillia. June 21st, 2021, Canada passed a C5 bill to make September 30th a statutory federal day that would observe a national day for truth and reconciliation, previously known as Orange Shirt Day, that started in 2013. That's our first national awareness of truth and reconciliation. So we're 7 years now into this process. 7 years ago, when I asked the artists, would you like to be a part of this? The answer was, what is that? So Common
7
Canada.
years later,
yes,
now we have a statutory holiday.
that's right, and everybody knows about orange shirts. So something has happened here, okay? March in 2021, our Western knowledge keeper, Austin Clarkson, died. So John Ulrichs, one of our artists, stepped in. That was a great loss for us. 2022 in May, here's the big one. May 28th, 2022, unmarked graves of 215 children that were already referenced in Peter Adams' round 1 image of cultural excavation that we looked at. 215 children were confirmed to be buried in an orchard at Kamloops Indian Residential School. That shook everybody. Mm-hmm. I was concerned that knowing how this whole process itself can re-traumatize Indigenous and non-Indigenous people looking at the facts, I thought, I just don't, well, I'll ask, but I don't know if the artists are really up to it, because this was really, really. Mm-hmm. So I talked to St. Paul's, because they said, we really are hoping that you would do this. I said, I don't know if this is the time to do it. We may have to set back for a year and respect the grieving process. And they said, please, what can we do? Of all times, we need now direction. So I'm going to read you a letter in a minute about what happened. But shortly thereafter then, that was May. Then in July, Pope Francis came on a penitential pilgrimage to foster reconciliation among Indigenous people. The Pope. That had been being worked on for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And then, finally, in May 2023, the WHO declared the end of COVID. Now, that had implications, the COVID, for us, because we were unable to come together to pass the bundle in person to each other. So it was kept by John Ulrich. And that made a really big difference in how our artists felt connection, because the feather and all of the sacred bundle did not travel. Also, at a certain point in time, our images from the last round, they were being displayed down in Waterloo at an insurance company, Imperial Life, one of their grand halls. And all of a sudden, COVID was declared, and those images got locked up in their vault for almost a year until COVID, ended. So we were pretty shaken up. So September 2021, the leadership team asked us to please. They said in their letter, over the last 35 years, we have sought numerous means to heal this injustice, residential schools and legacy. Your art has helped deepen our awareness and inviting concrete responses. It's our understanding that you are considering another round of art as a part of Call to Action 83 initiative. We believe that this would be an important addition to the cultural conversation at this time and would love to be supportive of it. Thank you for considering this invitation of this round, third round, and we look forward to continuing this long walk of truth-telling and finding small steps forward. Well, I said, send it to the artists and we'll see what they say. And all 17 artists chose to continue and said, of all times, this is the time that we most need to do this. So this was a huge breaking point in the TRC understanding and psyche of Indigenous and non-Indigenous. The Indigenous population talk about the time of telling people from the very beginning that children are being buried, they're being murdered, they're dying, and we know where they're buried, we know this is happening, but they were never believed. So that's referred to as the time of knowing in Tanya Tagala's work. So the time of knowing finally was revealed, and it gave real credence and relief in some respects to the Indigenous population because, see, we told you, you just didn't want to believe it. And now the non-Indigenous population is experiencing huge earthquakes in their psyche and their soul because now we cannot deny we did this. This was done on the dominant society's behalf to civilize and to solve the Indian problem. So the major trauma now is in the court of the non-Indigenous people.
And I remember during that time, Jeff, a friend to the podcast, a friend to us, a friend to you, an elder held a sacred fire during that time at Springwater Park.
Yep, 4 days.
And I remember taking my boys there, and we made an offering to the fire. And there was just as many Indigenous as non-Indigenous. And it was a really interesting piece, because like you're saying, it was that COVID time, it was this, like, we can no longer deny, not that we were denying, but I'm just saying as a society. And since then, there have been more bodies found, so it's not that this is becoming a big thing, much bigger than what people wanted to believe. And that was the first peeling back of, like, this is now the truth. The truth is now finally coming to evidence that can no longer be denied. Right?
And you know, that COVID, I was at that the 4-day sacred fire, and I had a chance to really ponder and interact with everybody. And one of the things that struck me was COVID softened our hearts because there is no one that doesn't know somebody that didn't get COVID or didn't die from COVID, or a nursing home that didn't, lose a whole layer of elders during that time. So we were really sensitized to the death, unexpected death, from something that was almost an unknown, invisible, quote unquote, enemy. And so when the families came to offer their condolences at the fire, it was very interesting. The school board in the area has done a very good job of teaching children history. It was the little kids who brought their parents by the hand, and the parents who said to me, I had no idea, what can we do? And it was the little ones who were talking to the adults, explaining things. And teddy bears were left and flowers were left, and we chatted about what is it when people say, what can I do? That was when those of us who worked in this field started asking that question, what is the response to that? Because people are asking it now. And our consensus was, start learning the history. Go to the library, read a book, listen to your children. So that was a very, very moving time because we were all sensitive to loss and death and sudden loss.
Yeah. And the uncontrollability of it all, the unknowing,
absolutely.
How long is this going to go on? When does it end? What do I do? There's a palpable fear. I remember all of that.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting time. So would you say that impacted that very first? I mean, it impacted all of it.
It impacted, yes, all of it.
Looking at the very first one.
The very first piece here, we began with, once again, we went into a sweat lodge and drew names to see who would go in what order.
Yeah.
And the first one, again, this is Albert Snake. And Albert is new to our process this time. He stepped in for someone else. And Albert, he tells the story in his painting of the fact that we are not alone. And to be alone makes one totally vulnerable and fearful. We can't do this alone. We're not meant to do it alone. And so he depicts this whole thing in his image up here. And you see the ancestors on the bottom, the male and the female, offering smudge to cleanse the world and to keep our relationships in a good way. And above that, you see a green turtle shell. And he talks about how he kind of made this image of sort of a safety belt, a big, like a WWC wrestling, whatever you call that.
WWF.
Yeah, right. And here's Mother Earth right in the middle. You know, that is our buckler and our shield. It's Mother Earth. We are of the earth. And our ancestor, we are our ancestors. He tapped into that. And he talks about that. And indigenous people know their ancestors more than probably we know ours. When they introduce each other, they start talking about what lineage they're from. So anyway, he says, you know, we're not alone. And the bear is there to protect us, and it protects the community. And the community, you see the little teepee sort of structure on the back inside the stomach of the bear, who is there to keep us safe. And you see, so you see the turtle, you see the belt of safety of the earth. There are petroglyphs of footprints of all the different clans. You see the antlers of the deer, the geese, the moon. All of creation is here to support. We're part of it. We're never alone. And when we understand that we are part of everything and everything is a part of us, we begin tapping into the 7 grandfather teachings, and the first one probably is humility. I am not alone. And that allows us then to connect, to be interdependent.
Yes, which is such a contrast to, I would say, how, if you want to call it Canadian culture, whatever.
Western derivation.
Is very hyper-individualistic.
Yep.
You are an individual. What do you need to do? Pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yep.
You need to get yourself right. You need to handle your own business. You know, it is a very, as we were talking before the podcast, it's a very fragile state of mind. People think that they're going to be able to be this island on their own, and they're going to be able to manage it. And I think that's a little bit going back to that COVID time. There was a lot of mentality there. At the beginning was like, I need to take care of my community. We need to all come together. And then something in there, the fear, the prolonged whatever, there's all kinds of theories. I'm not going to get into the conspiracy of it, but like, it somehow it felt like it shifted back to, I need to make sure that I'm okay. So I'm going to make sure I take all the toilet paper so that nobody else, you know what I mean? So it's a really interesting looking at that first piece of the indigenous knowledge of understanding humility and how we're not alone. And the more that we assert that we are, the worse that it is, to Western culture, which is, like you just need to take care of yourself, you know?
And aspects of Mother Earth and all the living creatures, it's pretty obvious that if an animal is out there all by itself, it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so we are putting ourselves in that vulnerable. The animals don't teach us that. They teach us community and safety in number and cooperation, etc. So so he's making it very clear that, as I guess the old sayings would be, safety in number, but not only safety in number and outnumbering, but safety in relationship to other. Yeah. So he begins with that concept. And so he passed his on to Jeanette Lecaisse, who at this point in time in her life, not only is all this COVID going on, but her husband passed away. And so she's now going through the grieving process, and she is feeling very alone. And yet her theme is really going forward together. And it's hard to see it, but there's an impression of her grandmother's doily. And it gives her comfort in the time of loss and grief and separation. And when you look at that doily, it really is so almost like a well, it's all interrelated. It's that string connection. It's the web of life. It's that very maternal female connection that grounds her in her time of grief and sorrow and separation. And then she talks about how all human beings, we have to start now coming together and going forward together in a good way. And she takes, and the images of people are neither male nor female, they're humans, so it's an archetypal thing. And people from all different walks of life and all different DNAs, all the same mitochondria though, because the mitochondria is the spark of the sun. And at the very bottom, some loops and some porcupine quill looking that she borrowed from the indigenous motifs. And she said, you know, we're all of the same earth and we're going forward together. She said, how is it that we have managed to pollute our waters so badly that there are some First Nations that don't even have water now? We need to go forward together. And our song for the call to action, when we asked the elders originally, how do you say truth and reconciliation in Ojibwe? The consensus was at that time, the understanding was given to us that it was going forward together in a good way and in harmony. And so without consciously referring to that, she depicted that in her moment of greatest vulnerability.
Well, it's interesting because this round is centered in vulnerability with COVID.
Huge.
It's centered in the discovery of the children's bodies. The first piece is talking about the vulnerability with the land. The second piece is the idea of like connection to land, connection to others. It's a very strong theme. And so the third one, when I look at it, what you can see is from the back, a bunch of, looks like girls and boys, but I'm not entirely sure, looking away from you. Is it on paper?
Yes, it is. It's on paper.
So you can see 16 children with their backs turned. Which is kind of interesting to me because we're talking about community and solidarity and vulnerability, and then you come to this image of people that aren't connected with their backs turned, which is a very clear social symbol of I'm not interested, I've now moved away. So I'd be interested to hear what this piece...
Well, it's interesting because she intentionally had their backs turned so that you could identify without having a facial feature. And her great-grandmother was a quilt maker, and she used that pattern to decorate little people on the quilts. Only Mercedes cut the hair of the children on this one. Her great-grandmother would braid it carefully, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody out in Beausoleil apparently had one of these dolls in their house. But anyway, so the name of this is Colonization Started with a Blanket Filled with Smallpox and Given to the Indigenous People to Make Them Sick. Today in our communities, homemade quilts are given at birth and at weddings. And right there, we're talking about illness, invisible disease. She said her own personal history and the grief that she felt during the creation of her piece. In my very first piece, in the first round, I was in a very angry place. It came from a place of anger and frustration that this is our history. And in this round, I have the feeling of there being more acceptance and understanding of what has happened in the past and moving forward together. COVID really opened our hearts. We are really sensitive now. While I was speaking to Jeanette, I received the image of the need to make a blanket out of paper. In the vision, I can see people in this piece, but I don't know how to put them on the blanket, showing their face and giving them an identity. I don't want to give them identity so that people can put themselves in their shoes. To say, that's my story too. This piece is called Blanket. It's dedicated to my grandmother. She was a well-known quilter. She definitely did not want, my mother was supposed to continue her tradition, and she said my mother definitely did not want to make blankets. She said, so I received this image to make it out of paper bags, although it's not like the traditional way of sewing a blanket. This blanket is my contribution to the TRC. It's inspired by my grandmother's quilts. an attempt to recreate her pattern of children. Their hair is made out of yarn. My grandmother's braided each one of the hairs on her quilts. But in this work, I cut off the braids and left them at the bottom of the blanket. The lace found on the bottom and the top of this piece is my own random interpretation of the wampum belt, the two rivers flowing side by side. An agreement to share the land. Like the children on the blanket, the indigenous people of Turtle Island have given up so much to coexist with their settler counterpart. We have received nothing but meaningless words in return. Colonization started with a blanket filled with smallpox and given to the indigenous people to make them sick. Today in our communities, homemade quilts are given at birth, weddings, and it all started with a blanket. And now I give this homemade paper quilt to reconciliation, signifying the new beginnings to come.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she's touching on illness, smallpox, back to COVID, the vulnerability time, not putting a face so that we could all choose one to identify with.
Yeah.
So the vulnerability and humility of COVID.
Yeah. And the cutting of the braids, like what would have happened when they went to the residential schools, the loss of their hair, loss of their culture.
And the two-row wampum,
Yeah.
the top and the bottom, and all of the children in lines, as in a school lineup. And the two-row wampum is that we will both live with respect for each other, in peace, and as kin. So.
Interesting. So then we move on to now these next pieces. We have a T-shirt.
The T-shirt is the next one. Now this is when the national holiday is announced.
Okay.
And the woman who did this is Joanna McCune from this area. And Joanna's called this, "Our roads to recovery are going to be varied. Twisty, precipitous, slow, with unexpected revelations." Boy, couldn't you say that about COVID? I mean, really, it's a twisted way. Sometimes you're back in quarantine, sometimes you're not. It's, it leaves you off balance. So she just said, "A considerable portion of my work is a record of select historical phenomena marking place, particularly the domestic mapping of place by rural folk. I've been moved by banal tasks. My statement is, I am confident. My confidence is fueled and energized by conversations and quiet actions occurring from one side of Canada to the other. These desperate actions are grounded in hope, which is our big theme, respect, and growing ability to listen deeply. That's a really important aspect that steps into this round. Having something to say, then speaking out and being heard is paramount. This lengthy but steady process rests with us, and we can do this. I was inspired by Mercedes. Just a thought," she says. "When you conceived and put together the round one of Truth and Reconciliation Wildfire Project extended environment around the report and suggestions for the calls to actions, they were much different understandings than they are today as I see it. Now we can see that our roads to recovery are going to be varied, twisty, precipitous, slow, unexpected revelations like residential school mass graves. Our collective task, here it is to remain committed to reconciliation or fixing it, and to the long struggle ahead of us. Quiet reminders, not let any opportunity go by, no matter how trivial it may seem. Calling gently everyone to account who thinks reconciliation efforts are trivial, unnecessary, or so on. And how we respond as individuals is as important as responding as a collective of like-minded folk. This quagmire did not happen overnight, and we're not going to get through it any speedier. Let's get it right. Love, from Joanna." She's parroting what we had to do during COVID. We had to individually take action. We had to wash our hands. We had to trust that we were doing that. We had to trust that the other person was doing it. We had to take other community efforts, wear a mask. We had to think of the other. when Beausoleil First Nation began the process of COVID, their protective gear was held up by the Ontario government for quite a while. And so I talked to the people here at this community and also down at Waterloo where the artwork had been displayed and said, look, here's the deal. We can either make this another Spanish flu and watch our brothers and sisters die out on the island, or we can make masks. What are you going to do? And you could hear the sewing machines in this place. And once a week, Jeff would come by and get a huge garbage bag full of masks. From here and as far away as Waterloo, friends of ours in Barrie were doing it. I was making protective jackets and gloves and for the nurses who had to go visit everybody. They had no protective gear to get on that ferry. People stepped up. Nobody died from COVID from that. It was a huge, huge
On Beausoleil, you mean?
shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we stepped up and made a difference. So this is an incredible shakeup in society and in our Indigenous and non-Indigenous psyche.
So where would you like to go to next?
How about the one down below is really interesting. This young lady is an Indigenous young woman, and she is returning to all the traditional works of art or creations and teaching them. She's young, but you'd think that she was 70, you know? So she is carrying on the tradition to, in spite of missing and murdered, as well as the orange shirts, as well as all this consciousness that's going on. There's intergenerational tears, but she's got to get into that canoe. She has to be able to.
So what we're looking at is water with a canoe. Behind it is land with grass, or I don't know what the scale is, but and then there's a big white circle in the sky.
And that's her soul, that's her psyche, that's her spirit, okay? She is complete. And all of life is going through her authentic self now. And she's holding that circle together by passing on the traditional handworks to the next generation. So she goes all over America, or North America now, teaching hide tanning and bark work, and she's becoming who she is meant to be.
And so she passes it on to the next, which
is Xavier.
Which is a black canvas, and it's got a circle. Well, maybe you better to describe it.
Xavier's been, he started out in the first place. You'll see the 7 campfires that were in his piece in the first piece, coming out of darkness. So he is now understanding more and more and more about what are these 7 grandfather teachings, how do they demonstrate themselves in his cultural beliefs and other cultural beliefs, because they are universal values. And he is then talking about the tree of life and how the children who have been buried are the leaves on the ground who have come off the tree prematurely, the branches that have been severed, young people who have been dying unnecessarily, prematurely. He said, but you know what? The tree has powerful roots, and we're all coming together now and actually going to be able to blossom together under, you know, greater understandings of each other.
Right, and there's 2 people that are surrounding the tree and holding hands, one being white and one being, I would assume, indigenous.
Yes. Yes. And so he now has internal space and strength and understanding and compassion and humanity to be able to contain and hold together both traditions and understand the unifying factors in the service of life. And
we had a conversation prior about the word respect and how it really talks, what the dictionary meaning is really about regarding, being able to regard someone else's values and culture and beliefs and wants and needs without imposing. And so, you know, this idea of being able to hold space for everybody, for all the tragedy, all the goodness, for, you know, settler way of being, indigenous way of being, without, you know, just being able to hold the nuance of it is a really respectful thing, according to the dictionary.
Yes, and when we regard the truth,
the
facts, the truth, and understand how it influences each of us. We understand that, number one, we are in relationship. We have all been damaged by the false narrative of the colonial story. No one is greater than the other. And it is now our generation's time to fix. For the first time, we're coming together. That's what this is all about. The two worlds are coming together now the way we should have come together 500 years ago. We're sitting and talking to each other, and we're inspiring each other, and we're promoting inspiration and imagination and beauty and conversation. So this is what we should have done 500 years ago, and we're doing it now. And now it's under the threat of COVID. How do you do that when you can't be together?
This particular time, just as
Yes.
for those that might have missed that, we're talking about the context of the artwork that this was created in, was during COVID times. So then we pass on to...
We pass on to Wanda Menig. And Wanda Menig...
Can you describe the artwork for those that can't see it?
Sure. Let me just, for 1 second, I just have to do a little technology here.
No worries.
Okay. Jawanakwe, that's her indigenous name. It means Lady of the Warm South Wind, Wanda Menig, and she really is. You sit next to that person, and there is a warm quality there that, yeah, it's really comforting. Anyway, so Wanda's talking here about, I glanced up and I saw the Milky Way glowing, an amazing pink amid the dark sky, and it had these bright yellow flickering lights running through it. I asked, what is this? And the old man said to me, those kids are going home. Now, Wanda was never raised with her traditional teachings. Her mother wanted to keep her safe and did not pass on language and did not pass on the culture to her. And her understanding of what happened in this image is, she tells us that my right to be who I was meant to be now has space to become. You are meant to be you. You're not meant to be Indigenous. I am meant to be me. I am not meant to be non-Indigenous. I am an Indigenous woman, she says. I have a right to be honored and included, just as you. So truth is who we really are meant to be. And reconciliation is when I can be who I am and be honored and respected just as you are. Yeah.
And also reconciling, if anybody watched the podcast with Jeff, we talked about reconciliation as a personal goal of reconciling in your own life, reconciling with the truth of who you are.
Know your history.
With the reality of where you are.
Yep.
And that's that reconciliation piece that extends to the individual beyond with the Indigenous relations. Because as we did a workshop with you, with our board recently, and that was the thought of it, was that in order to enter this conversation space in a good way, you have to reconcile with your own thoughts, beliefs, ancestry in a good way. Because otherwise you can't meet the threshold for honesty and the threshold for reconciliation if you haven't done it for yourself yet.
Yeah.
Right?
So our job as non-Indigenous is to decolonize. And the opportunity and job for the Indigenous component is to re-indigenize. So we need to look at our own personal histories because we have all been damaged by the untold stories. It is no longer dominion over. It is necessary that we work together to survive. Social illness, the big metaphor, COVID. So this is driving our whole story. And so she said, I never dream. I never have dreams, she said. But the minute it was my turn to do this, I put that tobacco tie under my pillow, and she said, I had this enormous dream. And so I woke up and I sketched it really quick, and I had no idea what it was about. And it was all about meeting this old man. And she said, what is this pink in the sky? And that's where he said, oh, that's the children going home. And she understood that She is of that lineage. That is her history. Those are her teachings. She said, I had no idea that we came from the stars. I had no idea that we go back across the Milky Way. I had no idea, you know. And so she's answering the 4 questions that Murray Sinclair asked us. You know, where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And who am I? Mm-hmm. She said, I am finally having the freedom and the support to answer those questions for myself. That's what reconciliation is all about. When I do that, then I can be a full person. You can be a full person. So she's learning about her teachings of going back across the Milky Way to be reunited with her ancestors. And she lives between 2 worlds, the urban, the Western world, and nature. And she said, here I am. I've got a fish on my head. I've got all sorts of beautiful animals in my heart and on my arms. And at my feet are 2 birds. And when I saw that, I started laughing because I know what the last image has in it. And it's the only image that has other birds in it. And it talks about the same thing. So that's Wanda Meneg. And she passed hers on to Peter Adams. And Peter Adams is the one who foretold the residential school bodies being detected in round 1. He's a landscape artist. And Peter...
Looks like a landscape, for those that can't see it, it looks like a landscape with the northern lights.
Yes.
Across the sky. So a very beautiful night sky with green and yellow northern lights over a forest lake landscape. Maybe some city there too. Looks like there's some lights.
And you'll see a very, very, if you look, when you can see it close, you will see a shadow of a human being with their back to us. And he's sort of standing in a higher perspective.
Oh, yeah, I see now.
And he is the honorary witness. And he did not realize that during the Truth and Reconciliation process, they did it in an indigenous manner of collecting stories and hearing and witnessing their stories rather than a legal one like South Africa did. And they did that because the victims or the survivors had said, like we talked about, the knowing. Everybody knew this, but nobody would witness it. They had honorary witnesses, indigenous and non-indigenous witnesses, who sat with the group and who witnessed those stories so that those indigenous people could say, you see it, you hear it. Now you can't ever say you didn't know. And so there he puts himself in there, and we can step into that. Now we're being asked to step in as a witness. Here we were asked to be stepping in as a child. Like
referring to one of the earlier artworks.
The quilt.
Yeah.
So he invites us all now to witness the Northern Lights. This is the energy that's happening in Canada, land where there is heart all over. People are returning to their authentic truth and being allowed to be the person they were meant to be. They are learning where they're coming from. Where are they going? Why are we here? And who am I? We are here to restart this and redo it in a good way, to respect the truth. And so he is inviting us to be the authentic witness now to our own history that has atrocities and to the indigenous history that has been suppressed by those. So he says we're all grappling with this unspeakable history, and that attempting to process that history is a necessary step toward reconciliation. The dark figure represents me as a witness to these times, and simultaneously it represents anyone looking at the painting. I feel that we are all grappling with the unspeakable history, and that attempting to process that history is a necessary step toward reconciliation. Wanda told me unsettling details of her mother's experience in residential school, as well as her own traumatic school experience. And then she told me that for her, reconciliation will mean finding ourselves again, no matter who we are, so that we may walk that spirit road back to our ancestors again, balancing who we are in our hearts and who we need to be in a greater colonized society. He says, I chose to honor many of the things that she told me by incorporating fragments of the text in the underpainting. So if you look really closely, he has etched words into the darkness.
Oh, okay.
So there are all the children and the stars. There are the star people going back home.
Oh, yeah, I can see it. It would probably be very difficult for the camera to pick up, but you can
It's
see.
hard to see it even close by. He
Yeah.
does that in all of his works.
Huh.
Not so much anymore, but during that phase. So he is the honorary witness so that this cannot be denied.
Right.
Okay, so then he passes his down to Paul Whittam.
Okay. So can you describe what the painting looks like first?
Paul Whittam has painted a stark white indigenous spirit-looking man, almost shamanic, standing on top of a black outlined, rather pointed pile, a hill, small hill, with a concentric gray line and then a white line that really draws out the gray and white of the indigenous man standing on top of the hill. There are dead trees growing out of it with black rocks on it. And the spirit is, the human figure there is emitting green light. Now, he did not see the last painting here, which is considered the color of healing. The sky is a green and a blue, midnight colors. There are stars looking like possibly the Milky Way with a meteorite exploding in the sky, as well as a great big orange moon, full moon, like a supernova, like a supermoon. And the dancer has red lines on his face, as in regalia painting, and I think he has just clear holes for his eyes. So here's what he says. Or not. Now playing. I just hit the wrong thing. Anyway, he talks about dancing for the spirits of the children who are crossing over, and that they may return to their ancestors. And he said, you don't know if this is one of the children's spirits that's on top of this hill, or if it's a person still here living on this planet, or one of his own people present in this area. He said, we are all now in spirit dancing for those children. And if you look back at Paul's first painting, he uses a similar motif of earth on the bottom, with him and his son standing above it on a Muskoka sunset, sunrise, circular sort of image. This one, he's standing on top of the rocks, and the inside of the rock is white. It's devoid of the shadow of the residential school and the bear that is hiding, which is their source of healing. It's been unleashed and uncovered. Light has been shown on it.
Right.
So the truth has been shown.
It's really interesting because you have, for those that aren't here, you can see that there's a lot of green kind of going through a lot of the artwork, in the northern lights and the fish with the old man with the pipe and the grass in the very first piece. And this green kind of really stands out. So that's really interesting. So then we move, and I know you're going to catch up here, so I'll just go to the next one, is black paper, it seems.
Yes,
and
this is Jenny Clark again. Yep.
Okay. Go ahead if you're ready to.
Yep, it's square and it's on black paper. And this is in the red little paper dolls on either side, white little crosses on the bottom. Some shiny sequence for stars above the square that is orange. And in the middle, a large black silhouette of a cross that opens up into the sky. And superimposed on that is birch bark cross, and superimposed on that is a half cross of turquoise beading. This is also done of the same paper that she used in her first one, Bible paper. And this is right after the Pope showed up and talked about the genocide. So Jenny looks at this and she said she was kind of really so distressed and overwhelmed by what was happening historically at the time. She said, I went through all of my old print papers to see if I could find anything that would evoke me into creating something positive here. And she found this orange square, and if you look at it, it has doilies and it has little orange children. She said, oh, there they are, Orange Shirt Day. Now, her original piece, the two dresses, are the foreshadowing of Orange Shirt Day.
Right.
And
that was
now,
done before the Orange
7
Shirt Day.
years
Yeah.
before, yeah.
Yeah.
And so now we have a national holiday for it. In 2013 that started, but now it's National Indigenous Day and Reconciliation Day, and this paper appears again. So she talked about how when the Pope came, she had a lot of expectations, and she felt very, very distressed because she felt that the church had a lot of unfinished business to do. And that's why she beaded the turquoise only half cross. And yet when she unveiled that privately to all the artists, we all said, but Jenny, that's a turquoise pipe.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
And she said, oh, I had no idea. She said, I wondered. So not only that, but she also talks about the stars and the children returning to their star world.
Right.
And
a lot of celestial themes as well.
yes, and she says, often we stand outside and we look at the sky, and there we are. We are from the stars. The indigenous population knows that. She says, here we are. We look up and we see ourselves, and we think of our relatives and we think of our loved ones, and that's not a coincidence. So, and she said, I wish to thank Petra Hewson for framing this work in the spirit of reconciliation. I wish to thank the Church of St. Paul's for housing our work. And I wish to thank all of the participants and artists and curator for being together. And Paul Whittam for giving me his inspiration. Yep.
So then we move on to the next piece, which you'll see two indigenous people wrapped in a Hudson Bay blanket.
Yes.
Which again speaks to the theme of disease.
Yes. The intentional implanting of smallpox in the Hudson Bay blanket. This is done by Marianne Manache, and she says Hudson Bay's part in resolving the Indian problem. Now, this is kind of curious because Hudson Bay is flourishing. This is the year that they're, every time you buy a Hudson Bay motif product, we will donate X amount of money to Truth and Reconciliation. Well, who went bankrupt? So, sort of a funny
thing.
Yeah, it's kind of coincidental that they went bankrupt. Because she said, I don't know how, if anybody knew the history of what went on with Hudson Bay and our people, why would they ever buy a Hudson Bay blanket? Why would they ever patronize them? And why would they ever buy something with the Hudson Bay motif? Because it was the motif of genocide. When the Hudson Bay no longer needed the indigenous people for their fur trading, they knew that they had to get rid of them. It was the first massive layoff. And so what they did was, the Canadian government talked about infesting blankets like the United States did and passing them out to the indigenous. But Jeff said, as he went through all the archival records, he said the conservatives of the time decided that was too expensive. So they didn't do that, but Hudson Bay did. So they handed out blankets to the people that they wanted to dispose of infested with smallpox. So here's what Marianne says. This made me laugh. She said, I was inspired by Jenny's work and our conversation. So much has happened in these past few years in Canada. Jenny talked about the Pope's visit and the 215 children that were confirmed in unmarked graves, and that there were 138 more residential schools yet to scan for children who never went home. The First Nations have always known about the residential atrocities. We did tell the authorities, and no one wanted to believe us. Or if they did, they chose not to act on it and hold people accountable. My work speaks to the Hudson Bay's part in resolving the Indian problem. My family, in particular, comes from a long line of trappers who worked for Hudson Bay. And when the company didn't need us anymore, they came up with the idea of infesting their blankets with smallpox. That was done in the States. Why not do it here? And I remember when my mother wasn't feeling well one day, she asked my father to go get her a blanket, and he turned to get her one, and she called out, "Don't bring the pox one." Yeah, imagine that. That's how I learned about the Hudson Bay smallpox blankets. The company wanted to get rid of us, too. When I see people wearing Hudson Bay socks, coats, and using other products, I realize they don't know the history of the Hudson Bay blanket germ warfare. We're still here waiting for the corporate world to tell the truth and set things right. And now the question of how do you set it right with all the artifacts that really need to be returned to the Indigenous people that they tried to solve the problem of with smallpox blankets.
Right.
So the circles come all the way around for Hudson Bay. So she passed hers on to John Ulrich. And John Ulrich sat and listened to her story, and he said, the thing that really moved me about this is the eyes of the young woman that's being held in the blanket. So I actually purchased that painting from her, and the original name of that painting is Hudson Bay Love. So John is looking at her eyes, and he said, my thumb isn't moving fast enough on my page here, okay. In order to heal those deep intergenerational impacts from the horrendous things that have been done to First Nations Indigenous peoples, imagination and soul are required. That's the antidote. So he talks about how he looked at this. He said, I'd like to say a couple of things in my response to Marianne for sharing that piece with me in the context. It was a powerful, powerful painting. And I think I understand a little bit better now where its power comes from. The irony and the cynicism that is expressed in the Hudson Bay blanket and the act of spreading smallpox through the agency of it, I think part of the power is part of the power of the piece. But the thing that really transfixed me was the expression in the eyes. There's profound sadness, there's a sense of outrage, and there's also a defiance. Mm-hmm. But frankly, words fail me in terms of describing how that expression affects me in the absence of eyes and the other figure. I think the absence of those eyes just enhanced the impact. So not surprisingly, my piece is all about eyes. So he talks about the direct gaze to the obvious stuff that we know, that there's a need for practical compensation. There's a need for financial compensation in response to history. Things like drinkable water, livable homes, ownership of land. That's going to take money to fix, and that's pretty obvious what needs fixing, that what is going to take and how much it's going to take to fix it, so that this is represented by the open eyes. The downward gaze is of humility. I chose to talk to the things that need changes, that are complicated, and this is what Jeanette has talked about often, systemic, relational, and are not just going to be fixed by money. I'm thinking of things like getting rid of the Indian Act, allowing self-governance around issues of education and healthcare. It's for complex systemic issues that take a lot of patience and humility to fix. Issues of soul, issues of deep personal wounding. In order to heal these deep intergenerational impacts from the horrendous things that have been done to First Nations, Indigenous peoples, imagination and soul are required. The antidote to those things are imagination and soul or spirit. I'm so grateful to hear that so many of the elders today are speaking about the power of imagination. Austin Clarkson represented that in this community of non-Indigenous artists. And I think it can be very helpful. At one point, I had some white crosses in the background of the painting, and I thought to myself, you know what? That really doesn't belong there. I'm going to put a question mark in their place. This happened at the time of discovery of more buried children. The question mark relates to why, where, those basic questions. Now, he also refers back to the silhouette underneath in the rock of Paul Whittam's previous painting in round one of the residential school silhouette that's buried in the rock below Paul's feet.
So then he passes it on to the next.
Who is Guy Kopagog. Guy Kopagog joined us for the first time in this round. He's from Beausoleil First Nation. And he says, you could put the image of a feather headdress anywhere in the world and people would say, oh, that's First Nation. Well, that's not really who we are, right? In this piece, he talks about the identity that has been lost and the struggle that he and all of his people are going through. And he passed his work on to me, and when I chatted with him, he said, I really wanted these tears to be globulous, to be really feelable. He said, because that is how thick and how long we have been crying these tears. And he said, I was going to put wings on this person's back. He said, no, that would be too Christian. He said, I'm not of that. He said, so I put a headdress on this individual because that is where I am becoming my authentic self. So this is sort of like the bursting open of a seed of his true self. Again, we don't know if it's morning or night. We don't know if it's sunset or sunrise. And we don't know if he is sitting in a puddle already of water or if he is creating it by his tears. But it certainly speaks of individuation, the isolation that can feel when you're working against the whole system. And so he's talking about the strength and the courage and the beauty of becoming that individual at that moment of bursting forth. The tension in it is quite remarkable.
And then passed it on to you.
Yeah, he passed it on to me, and I thought, oh my God, look at the isolation in this. And did we not feel that way in COVID? Well, that's how indigenous populations have been feeling for over 200 years or 500 years. So we are now becoming far more accustomed to what the tensions and the fears and the isolation that indigenous people have suffered. So I looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, there's all I can do is say, we're in this together. And there's an African expression that's called Ubuntu, and Desmond Tutu spoke about it in the time of reconciliation in South Africa. But now remember, South Africa did a litigious legal process to resolve truth and reconciliation, and it was initiated by the government. The one in Canada, the Truth and Reconciliation, was a lawsuit brought by the Indigenous survivors against the Canadian government, and the process was resolved through an Indigenous process of reconciliation and telling of truth and explaining what needs to be done to heal. There was no legal litigation process involved in that. It was a witnessing of the truth, and that's what the Indigenous people wanted. They just wanted the truth out and witnessed, and then look at what needs to be done to be changed, and then just change it. So all I could do was say, I'm crying too. And over time, I've come to realize that as oppressor and oppressed come together and realize that we have both been damaged by this process of intergenerational conquest and colonialism, that we both need to become who we are meant to be. Our tears, we cry together. Our hearts, they bleed together. And we return those waters to where they need to be. And the name of that is called returning the waters to the earth. So when our tears and our blood return to the earth, they spark new life in dry earth. And you see the teardrops turn into flower buds, and they are carried by the waters. It brings life to a dead tree who begins to sprout leaves, and another form of blossom that is yet to come. And we don't know if it's sunrise or sunset, but that's where we become human.
So we got a few more to go here. We got a little bit of time left.
So I passed mine on to Marilyn George, and Marilyn George's last piece was of the Indigenous family that the Creator allowed and set back in a tree, an apple tree, because originally the eagle came and rescued them and took them away until it was safe to return them. So the eagle returned them to an apple tree. Of course, the apple tree is the orchard where the children were found in the residential school, the 215. So here is her image again. The eagle and the grandfather and the grandmother, the ancestors, are now guiding the children from the residential school that in the last work used to be the apple tree. It's been turned into a facility, so it's been colonized. And the children have done their work now, and they are going home to their ancestors. So the knowing is now known. And she said to me when I passed my work on to her, she said, you know what, stop crying. The time to cry is over. You didn't do it, your ancestors did. It's your job to fix it. So boy, did I learn from that one. She's a seasoned woman. She speaks clear, and I really respect her and treasure her friendship. Okay, so she passed hers on to Ryan Osman, who is from the island of Mauritius. He is now living in Canada, and he does water projects in the far north, over in Labrador and Newfoundland, for an agency that is trying to return clean waters to First Nations across Canada. And so he is a photographer, and so he sat down and chatted with these folks up in Labrador area that he was working with, and he asked them, what does truth and reconciliation look like and sound like to you? And they said, back to the land. We need our land. We need land. Return us to the waters. Let us have sovereignty over our waters. We're not here to exclude you. We'll include you, but give us sovereignty again. We're learning to take care of our waters as our ancestors did. We are part of creation. We don't have dominion over it. You're welcome to live with us. That's the original Turo Wampum.
Right.
That was passed on to Nancy King, Ogima Benekwe, which means chief ladybird. And she lives in Rama, and she did this painting, superimposed image over a photo, and she talks about keeping of the fish. Now, we all know that there are the weirs of
Can you
Minjikini.
explain the picture before we...
Sure. You'll see a pickerel superimposed in a woodland art style of art with black outlines and orange fish eggs in the tummy, orange spheres of life surrounding it, looking like a moriso. And it's superimposed over a family who is spearfishing in the waters in the Rama area in Kuchiching. They're teaching the youth the traditional fishing techniques of spearfishing. And they are spearfishing for the entire community. They are fishing and cleaning the fish and giving it to the elders and the old people who are unable to continue fishing. And they are also learning on what does it mean to remove a fish from the water. Well, it means there's a certain time of the year that you do it. Our ancestors taught us that. And they also taught us that we have to milk the eggs and sperm to create sufficient future fish. So if we take one, we return hundreds to secure our food and to honor the fish. Okay? So they stay in harmony with the balance of life. And so she superimposes the following script. Fish are my favorite symbol for food sovereignty. Gigon, which is fish, physically nourish us, and they bring family and community together too, catching, cleaning, frying, and eating together. Chimigwich gigon, which means thank you, or you have given enough fish. And so that's how her family comes together. So the reciprocity of life. She passed hers on to Christina Luck, who is our final artist. The first image is We Are Not Alone, Return to the Earth. The final image is, this stick is the pickerel represented in Nancy King's piece. So on the back of the pickerel, in reverse and upside down, she has scripted land back. And she went through her works, and long time ago she did a splatter painting of greens. She said, I have strived all my life to find the color of green that I know is the healing color green. She said, that was the closest I could come to it. She said, so on top of that, I superimposed a reflection pattern for a reflection pond. I also put in the pickerel, and she said, and then I topped it off with 3 flying ducks. The only other painting in this work that has birds in it, besides Wanda Meneg's. And she talks about if we understand land back concept and return to the earth, we will begin to really live the values of the grandfather teachings that are universal values in all religions, of honesty, truth, love, respect, humility, courage, wisdom. So we start out with earth and balance, and we are asked to process all of these vulnerabilities in our earth quality that affect us physically, that sustain us physically, so that we can be healthy. And if we do return to the earth will return us to health. So it's a complete cycle. And oddly enough, this is the year that the last white buffalo was born. And when that white buffalo was born in Yellowstone Park, Orville Looking Horse went down, and they had several days of fasting and ceremony. And the name of that white buffalo is Return Sacred, Wakan Gli in Lakota. And it means it's time for us now to return to the sacred so we can return sacred. So this is about the spiritual shift. So we have the knowledge, the emotional, the spirit, knowing that we are related to all, not greater than a blade of grass or a pike, but that we sustain each other and depend on each other. And the opposite of that is COVID, isolation. I can do it myself. Divisible. And that's the end of the fourth round. When we brought this fourth round to the elders, or the third round, excuse me, to the elders, it was in, let me go back to more about the story here. Anyway, this is when Lorraine McCrae, Elder Lorraine McCrae from Rama, as well as Chief Ted Williams was here, and they agreed that, you know, you're 3/4 of the way through the medicine wheel. The beginning is the knowledge, where the sun comes up in the morning and the idea appears and the question appears. The second is the relationships needed in order to constellate or to bring to life the process. This one is the spirit healing of the body and the earth. And she said, I wonder what the fourth round, the northern doorway, will bring, which meant that for sure we would be doing a fourth round. And that's when we realized as artists that this wasn't just an Indigenous, or this wasn't just a non-Indigenous, oh, Mary Lou Meiers had an idea. No, what started out as a linear process is really now completed in a circle. The entire, we were only going to do it once, but the Indigenous elders made it very clear that this was an ongoing process that will never end. You will always come up with a new question and have to walk the entire cycle of learning of all the different, and it needs time and seasons. Sort of like the process of grief. You have to live all 4 seasons before you have your own life again. And then you ask, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a continual relationship that is being built that we did not have the chance or did not choose to do when we hit the shores in 1492 because we were so busy trying to survive physically after our quote-unquote exiles. So the next one is the northern doorway.
And we'll have to come back for that.
There you go.
We got one more podcast to do.
One more
We might
podcast
have
to do.
more
Well,
to do with you,
stay
but
tuned.
we've got one that's for sure planned.
And there will be other iterations of the call to action. So stay tuned. I'm having a conversation this coming weekend about what will that look like and sound like. And I think you'll find it very interesting. This gallery is going to be probably active for at least 30 years. It's a process. It's not a one-of.
Okay, well, I think Adam will put in the show notes about how to come and see this and where, because we've talked about it before. Thank you, Mary Lou.
And go to the website.
Yes. Adam will put that in the show notes. So thank you again for this amazing experience. We'll see you guys next time when we do number 4, as well as we've got a couple of interesting podcasts coming up about water. So make sure you're paying attention. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
All right.